Welcome back to Sleepy Historian, where the past drifts by in a calm whisper, a space for those who find peace in the quiet hum of old stories. This is Boring History for Sleep, where we explore the overlooked corners of human history, not to excite you, but to ease you toward rest. If this kind of slow, soft storytelling helps you unwind, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. And if you're awake long enough, let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and perhaps what time it is. There's something strangely comforting in knowing that somewhere, out in the night, others are drifting off to the same old stories, the same gentle murmur of time moving on. Tonight's quiet journey takes us far back into the Middle Ages, to a world where sleep itself was an art, a ritual, and at times, a mystery. The people of medieval Europe didn't sleep the way we do now. Their nights were divided, sacred, and steeped in curious habits, whispered prayers, flickering candles, and the creak of timbered chambers under the soft weight of darkness. Imagine yourself inside a stone cottage, where the scent of smoke and straw hangs in the cool night air. The fire glows faintly on the hearth, and the shadows of the rafters sway like slow-moving ghosts. A family curls under wool blankets stuffed with feathers, their breathing syncing with the rhythm of the wind outside. This was not just rest, it was ritual. Every sigh, every candle, every whispered charm against the unknown was part of the great nightly dance between waking and dreams. In this video, we'll drift gently through 4 parts of that world, each a window into how people once lived their nights. First, we'll step quietly into the daily rhythm of medieval sleep, the places, sounds, and sensations that surrounded bedtime long before electricity. Then, we'll meet figures whose lives and nights tell a story of belief, fatigue, and ritual. Monks, peasants, and nobles whose sleep patterns reflected their roles in a divinely ordered world. After that, we'll explore the mysteries, superstitions, and strange customs that filled the hours between dusk and dawn, from dreams believed to be messages to the spirits said to wander the night. Finally, we'll drift into the chambers of the elite, where silk sheets, perfumed candles, and midnight vigils painted a contrasting picture of nocturnal life. This isn't a tale of war or conquest. It's a soft unraveling of something far more universal. The simple, enduring act of closing one's eyes and surrendering to sleep. So, as you settle in, let the day fall away. Dim the lights. Let the embers fade to quiet orange. Let the hum of history soften your thoughts. And together, we'll wander through the weird, wonderful world of medieval sleep rituals. A place where night was sacred, dreams were divine, and even rest itself was a form of faith. This is Boring History for Sleep, a soft-spoken history documentary, a gentle history sleep story for those who find comfort in calm narration, in bedtime relaxation and soft storytelling, in relaxing history to fall asleep to. So, settle back, the past is waiting, and it whispers softly just for you. Imagine the sun setting over a medieval village, the last ribbons of gold fading beyond a patchwork of thatched roofs and narrow lanes. The air cools slowly, and with it, the rhythm of life changes. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer falls silent. The lowing of oxen drifts across the fields, and somewhere, a church bell tolls the hour of vespers, a quiet signal that the world is ready to rest. In those days, before the steady pulse of electricity, night was something alive, vast, heavy, and absolute. When darkness came, it wasn't a soft glow behind a curtain. It was a weight that filled every corner, pressing close around walls of wattle and stone. The people of the Middle Ages didn't fight it. They accepted it, shaped their lives around it, and made peace with its slow, unhurried passage. Inside a peasant's cottage, you might find the evening unfolding with gentle predictability. A small fire glows in the hearth, giving off a faint scent of ash and wood smoke. The family gathers close, children rubbing tired eyes, the mother whispering a short prayer in the language of habit rather than devotion. Bread hard from the mornings, baking softens near the warmth of the embers, and a few wooden bowls rest empty on the table. There is no sense of hurry. The tasks of the day are done. The rhythm of their lives is shaped by the turning of the sun and the quiet will of nature. Sleep, when it comes, is not an interruption, but a continuation, another part of that natural rhythm. Most cottages have a single room, shared by all. The hearth gives warmth to the center, while rough straw pallets line the walls. A family might sleep together beneath woolen blankets filled with feathers or reeds, their bodies a shared source of warmth in the chill of night. The air is thick with the faint scent of damp straw, smoke, and the earthy aroma of clay floors. Listen closely, and you can almost hear it, the soft rustle of shifting fabric, the quiet sigh of someone turning over the crackle of wood. It's a symphony of stillness, a slow, breathing world at rest. But sleep in the Middle Ages was not one long stretch. Historians now know that people often slept in two distinct phases, what we might call first sleep and second sleep. The first began soon after dusk and lasted for several hours. Then, many would wake in the middle of the night, not alarmed, but peacefully, to pray, talk softly, or even tend to small chores by the dim glow of the hearth. This watch, as it was sometimes called, was a sacred interval. People might reflect on dreams, whisper a short psalm, or simply sit in the gentle dark, waiting for sleep to come again. Then, as the night deepened and fatigue returned, they would slip back under their blankets for the second sleep, until the faint light of dawn crept across the floorboards. In this strange rhythm, the night was both rest and wakefulness, both silence and subtle motion. It offered space for reflection, for whispered conversation, for thought. And because candles and firewood were precious, the world beyond the hearth remained shadowed, infinite, mysterious. The walls seemed to breathe with the wind, and the rafters above creaked softly, like a lullaby in wood and air. Imagine yourself there for a moment. The fire flickers low, the last flame bending like a tired dancer. The room smells of warmth and wool. A dog curls near your feet, and outside, the world is utterly black. You can hear the faint rhythm of someone's breath beside you. There are no clocks, no hum of distant traffic, no restless glow of screens. Only the soft ticking of your own heart and the whisper of time as it passes unseen. This was the nightly rhythm of medieval sleep, an unbroken dance between light and dark, wakefulness and dreams. It was a life attuned to nature's slow pulse, where even the smallest sound, a mouse in the straw, the creak of a door, the distant hoot of an owl, was a reminder that the world was alive, even in stillness. When people finally rose from their second sleep, the horizon would already be paling. The first roosters called, and the cold, gray dawn spread over the village. The fire, long dimmed, would be coaxed back to life. Another day would begin, the same as before and the same as tomorrow, a quiet rhythm, unchanged through centuries. In this soft repetition lies something deeply human. We have always sought the same peace, a safe corner of the world, warmth in the dark, and a few hours of unbroken rest before the sun's return. As we move forward, we'll step beyond the cottages and fields and into the cloisters of monasteries, where sleep itself was not simply rest, but devotion. There, the rhythm of the night was measured not by dreams, but by prayer. Now, let us step away from the flickering hearths of the village and walk, in imagination, up a winding path toward the high stone walls of a medieval monastery. The air here is colder, cleaner, and filled with the faint scent of damp stone and beeswax candles. The world outside is asleep, but inside these walls, a different rhythm governs the night, one not of comfort or leisure, but of discipline and devotion. The monastery was a place built upon the idea that every breath, every heartbeat belonged to God. Sleep was allowed, but only in moderation, as a necessary rest for the body, so the soul could return to prayer with renewed focus. The monks followed the rule of Saint Benedict, written centuries earlier, which prescribed not only their prayers and meals, but also the very hours when they were permitted to close their eyes. Imagine the dormitory, a long, echoing hall lined with simple wooden beds. Each bed is narrow, covered with a coarse wool blanket and a straw mattress. The air is cool and still, touched only by the faint sweetness of beeswax and the distant sound of chanting echoing from a chapel. There are no curtains, no privacy, only rows of sleeping figures beneath a single, unwavering light of an oil lamp. Sleep begins early. The monks lie down dressed in their habits, for even in rest, they must remain ready to rise. Their sandals are neatly placed at their feet, their rosaries coiled like quiet snakes beside them. Silence is absolute. Only the rustle of fabric or the quiet sigh of a body surrendering to rest disturbs the stillness. But this rest is brief. In the deep hours of night, the bell of the night office, matins, breaks the silence. It tolls not as an alarm, but as a call to obedience. The sound rolls through the stone corridors like a tide of sound and duty. One by one, the monks rise from their beds. They move slowly, quietly, like shades gliding through candlelight. They gather in the chapel, each carrying a small lamp, the flames flickering against cold walls. The floor beneath their feet is made of worn stone, smooth from centuries of the same motion. Sleep, prayer, sleep again. In this darkness, voices rise, soft at first, then growing in quiet strength as psalms are sung into the chill air. The rhythm is steady, unhurried, a murmuring tide that never ceases. Imagine the sound, the low hum of voices layered over one another, the gentle echo rising to the vaulted ceiling, the occasional creak of wooden benches. No drama, no urgency, only the repetition of sacred words meant to soothe the soul and anchor the mind. This is prayer as breath, as heartbeat. When the prayers end, the monks return to their dormitory, not to talk or linger, but to resume their short rest before dawn. In this way, the night is divided, not for indulgence, but for worship. They believe that to wake in darkness is to share in the watchfulness of angels, to stand guard while the world sleeps. It's a difficult rhythm for the body, but the spirit finds meaning in it. Fatigue becomes a form of offering. Every missed hour of sleep, every shiver under the thin wool, is a step closer to the ideal of humility and surrender. And yet, even in this austere world, small comforts exist. Some monks carve their initials into the wooden beams above their beds. Others tuck bits of lavender or rosemary beneath their blankets, believing the scent drives away bad dreams. A few may whisper a quiet prayer for rest, not asking for comfort, but simply for the strength to wake when the bell calls again. Outside, the world remains silent. The stars gleam over cloisters and gardens. Somewhere beyond the monastery walls, a village dog barks faintly, the sound barely reaching the ears of those within. The monks sleep again for a short, while before the faintest light of dawn touches the eastern windows. At daybreak, the bell rings once more, this time for lauds, the prayer of the morning. The monks rise, bow, and begin their day. The night has passed, measured not in dreams, but in prayers. For the medieval monk, sleep was not escape. It was a humble rhythm of surrender, to rest, to duty, to faith. It was a reminder that even in darkness, one's purpose remained constant. The act of lying down became a quiet devotion, a pause in the long liturgy of life. As dawn spills over the cloisters and the air fills with the slow tolling of morning bells, you can imagine how deeply time itself seemed to stretch within those walls. A calm eternity of prayer, rest, and renewal. In our next part, we'll move beyond the monastery's ordered quiet and into the superstitious heart of the medieval night, where dreams, fears, and unseen forces shaped how people understood the darkness around them. As we drift once more beyond monastery walls and return to the countryside, the night opens up again, vast, familiar, and filled with quiet lives bound together by simple needs. For most medieval people, the peasantry formed the rhythm of the world. Their sleep, like their work, was communal, practical, and deeply connected to the land. Imagine a small cluster of cottages huddled beneath a sky without city lights. The stars bright and sharp, the Milky Way like spilled flour across the dark. In the faint moonlight, thatched roofs gleam pale silver, and smoke curls lazily from chimneys. The village has fallen silent. Only the occasional bark of a dog or the distant bray of a donkey stirs the quiet. Inside, life settles into its nightly rhythm, a rhythm that has no need for clocks, no struggle against darkness, only the slow, shared surrender to rest. In a peasant household, space was precious. The same room that saw bread kneaded, tools mended, and children born by day became the chamber of rest by night. Families often slept close together, not out of affection alone, but out of necessity. The combined warmth of bodies was the surest defense against the damp chill that crept in through wooden shutters and cracks in the walls. Fathers, mothers, and children might share a single large bed built from rough timber, its mattress stuffed with straw or rushes. The smell of earth and hay filled the air. Sometimes a grandparent or servant would sleep nearby, wrapped in a coarse wool cloak. Even animals, a dog, a chicken, or in winter, a small piglet, might curl close to the warmth of the hearth. It was not strange or shameful, it was survival. This shared sleep created a quiet intimacy that modern life has forgotten. In that closeness, people listened to one another's breathing, learned to move quietly, to wake and settle without disturbing others. They shared warmth, but also fears, the distant sound of thunder, the creak of a shutter, the whispered belief that something unseen walked the night. Before lying down, many families performed small rituals, a prayer, a sign of the cross, or the murmured repetition of a charm passed down for generations. God guard our house and those within, they might say, believing the words formed a circle of safety around the sleeping. Some left a candle burning low, not for light, but to ward off spirits. Others drew symbols in the ash of the hearth, quiet guardians against misfortune. The middle of the night, the hour between first and second sleep, often carried a different kind of stillness. Sometimes a mother would wake and nurse an infant. A father might step outside to relieve himself or check the animals in the byre. The stars shone hard and clear. The world seemed larger then, and somehow both emptier and more intimate. Neighbors' houses glowed faintly with the orange pulse of dying fires, small islands of warmth in a sea of dark. This was also an hour for quiet talk between husband and wife, between parents and children who stirred awake. They might whisper about the next day's work, a memory, or a worry. These gentle conversations, hushed and half-dreaming, stitched the fabric of family life more tightly than daylight ever could. And yet, not every night was peaceful. Winter winds rattled doors, rain drummed upon thatch. Sometimes illness passed quietly from one bed to another. Sometimes a child cried in the dark, and no one knew why. The people of the Middle Ages accepted such things as part of life's rhythm, as natural as the turning of the seasons. There was no expectation of perfect comfort, only the slow acceptance of what was. When dawn came, sleep ended not with an alarm, but with sound, the rooster's call, the low murmur of cattle, the first stirrings of the household. Someone blew gently upon the embers, coaxing flame from the gray ash. The first light of day slipped through gaps in the shutters, falling across faces still soft with sleep. Imagine yourself waking there. The straw mattress rustles beneath you, and the air smells faintly of smoke and wool. You hear a child giggle, a pot being set upon the fire, the soft scrape of wood. Outside, the fields wait. Inside, life begins again, unremarkable, unhurried, eternal. The peasant's night was more than rest. It was an act of community, of quiet endurance. Every evening was a small reminder that survival itself was shared, that warmth, safety, and peace were not solitary achievements, but collective ones. In a world of uncertainty, they found comfort not in luxury, but in each other's presence. As we leave this humble cottage and its fading hearthlight, we move toward a stranger realm of the medieval night, the domain of superstition, of dreams and fears, of unseen visitors in the dark. For while the peasants slept, Their imaginations sometimes wandered through the mysteries that filled the hours between dusk and dawn. As night deepens over the medieval world, another realm awakens, one not bound by walls, candles, or bells. It is the world of dreams, a place both feared and revered, mysterious and divine. To the people of the Middle Ages, sleep was not simply rest for the body. It was a passage for the soul, a journey that carried meaning, warning, and sometimes revelation. Imagine yourself lying upon a straw mattress in a small stone chamber. The last candle flickers, its light trembling across the ceiling beams. Outside, the wind sighs against the shutters, and the room grows still. Gradually, the boundaries of the waking world soften. The air seems heavier, the sounds more distant, until only breath remains slow, steady, and rhythmic. It is in this half-lit space between waking and dreaming that the medieval mind believed the soul began to wander. To dream, they thought, was to glimpse beyond the veil of the ordinary. In monasteries, scholars debated the origins of dreams. Were they divine messages or illusions sent by darker forces? Some, following the ancient writings of Augustine, believed that dreams could carry warnings from God. Others feared that in the fragile hours of sleep, the soul might stray too far and become vulnerable to temptation or trickery. In many manuscripts, dreams were depicted as fragile threads connecting heaven and earth. Angels might descend, whispering guidance to the righteous. Demons might creep near, distorting the mind's peace. It was a nightly theater of the spirit, unseen but deeply felt. Common people, too, held to these beliefs. A woman might wake from a vivid dream and sit in the dim firelight, turning its meaning over in her mind. Was it a sign of fortune? A foretelling of death? Did the saint whose name she uttered in prayer send her a vision? Every detail, a bird, a field, a distant voice, could be read like scripture. Some dreams carried comfort. A vision of a lost, loved one smiling from a sunlit meadow, a sign that their soul rested in peace. Others brought unease, shadows, fire, a sense of falling. People spoke softly of such things in the morning, never sure whether to trust them. In a world without clear boundaries between the physical and the spiritual, the dream world was part of life itself, a nightly visitation of the unseen. Books known as dream manuals circulated in certain corners of medieval Europe. They listed interpretations. To dream of water might mean change, of fruit, abundance, of death, renewal. These guides, often copied by hand, blurred the lines between faith and superstition. Monks cautioned against them, but still they were read, in secret, under lamplight between prayers. The wealthy, too, gave weight to dreams. A noblewoman might summon a confessor at dawn to recount a troubling vision. A night before battle might pray not only for courage, but for a dream of victory, a sign of divine favor. Even kings consulted interpreters, believing that the future sometimes whispered itself into their sleep. But the power of dreams was not only in their meaning, it was in their mystery. In a world dimly lit and filled with faith, dreams offered connection to something greater, something both comforting and unknowable. The act of sleep itself became sacred, a small surrender of control, a letting go of the waking world in trust that the soul would return safely by dawn. There were prayers for safe dreaming. "Protect us, Lord, as we sleep," one common text read, "and watch over our souls until morning light." These words, repeated nightly, became both ritual and reassurance, an anchor for mind aware of how thin the veil between waking and dreaming could be. For the medieval dreamer, the night was a mirror. In its stillness, their fears, desires, and faiths were reflected back at them, strange, luminous, and shifting like candlelight. To fall asleep was to step into that mirror, to wander its depths, and to return, changed in ways not easily spoken. As the fire burns low and the first birds stir beyond the shutter, the dreamer awakes. The memory of the dream lingers, fading, yet potent. The world looks the same, and yet somehow it does not. The medieval soul carried its dreams like faint scars of the night, reminders of a dialogue between the human and the divine. In the next part, we will stay within this twilight realm, but look beyond the personal, into the mystical and the fearful, where superstition shaped not just dreams, but the very act of lying down to sleep. For in medieval imagination, darkness itself was never empty. It was alive, and every shadow might hold a story. When the medieval night settled over towns and villages, it brought with it more than darkness. It brought the unknown. In an age without street lamps or the hum of machines, the night was a living thing, deep, breathing, full of whispers. People feared what might stir within it. For to close one's eyes in that darkness was to surrender not only to sleep, but to all the invisible presences that might move unseen. Inside humble cottages, shutters were fastened tightly. The fire was banked low, not only to save wood, but to keep the flickering shadows from dancing too wildly, for shadows had power. They were said to mimic not just the body, but the soul. A restless shadow might mean a restless spirit. And so, people prayed before sleeping, crossing themselves, whispering the words that had guarded generations, "Deliver us from the terrors of the night." It was believed that evil spirits, too, were drawn to the sleeping. The weak, the sorrowful, the unguarded, all were thought to be vulnerable. Tales spread of creatures that pressed upon the chest of sleepers, stealing their breath. The word nightmare itself comes from the old belief in Amara, a spirit that sat upon its victim as they slept, smothering them with invisible weight. Those who awoke gasping in the dark did not speak of dreams. They spoke of visitations. To ward off such forces, charms and rituals were common. A sprig of rosemary by the bedside, a cross carved above the door, or the recitation of the Psalm of Protection. Each was believed to keep the soul safe through the long hours until dawn. Some tied small pouches of salt or bread at the corners of the bed to anchor their spirits to the earth, so they might not wander too far in dreams. Others hung iron near the bedpost, for iron was said to repel all manner of spirits. The night, to the medieval imagination, was not empty. It was inhabited by angels, demons, and the souls of the dead who had not yet found peace. In some places, people spoke of the wild hunt, a phantom procession that swept through the night skies. To hear its sound, the thunder of invisible hooves, the baying of spectral hounds, was to know that death had passed nearby. Even the winds were believed to carry meaning. A sudden moan through the rafters might be taken as a warning. The hoot of an owl near a window could mean sickness to come. And if a candle guttered without cause, it was whispered that an unseen visitor had entered the room. Such signs filled the night with watchfulness. The mind awake even as the body lay still. Superstition shaped the very architecture of sleep. Beds were often placed with care, never facing north, for that was the direction of the grave, never beneath an unblessed beam, lest spirits gather above. The hearth's glow was considered sacred, its light the boundary between warmth and wandering souls. A candle left burning overnight was a prayer in itself, a fragile flame against the dark's mysteries. In monasteries, even the devout were not free from fear. The rule of Saint Benedict prescribed night prayers, vigils, to keep the mind occupied when the world slept. For idleness, it was said, open the door to temptation. Monks rose in the small hours, walking the cold corridors with candles, chanting psalms to hold the shadows at bay. In their words echoed both faith and unease, the sense that, though protected by God, they lived in a world thick with unseen forces. For common folk, stories served as both warning and comfort. A mother might tell her children of a saint who watched over sleepers, keeping demons from their beds. Or she might whisper the tale of the restless dead, spirits who returned to finish their earthly tasks. The night thus became both sacred and haunted, a landscape of belief woven through every flicker of firelight. As the hours crept toward midnight, silence itself could feel alive. Dogs barked at what no one saw. The wind sighed across thatched roofs. Somewhere far off, a church bell might toll the hour, its hollow sound marking time not for the living, but for the spirits who wandered between. And yet, even within that darkness, there was comfort. For as terrifying as the night might seem, it also offered peace. It was a time when the world slowed, when prayers were whispered and hearts sought protection. The same silence that carried fear also carried faith. To sleep was to step into that balance, to trust that dawn would come, that the body would wake, and that the spirit would return untroubled. The medieval soul lived within that fragile promise, that every night was a small death, and every morning a quiet resurrection. As the first light of dawn broke, the fears of a night seemed foolish, fading like mist. Yet even as the roosters crowed and fires were stoked anew, something lingered, the awareness that darkness was never truly gone. It merely waited just beyond the horizon of light, ready to return with evening. In the medieval world, science and superstition shared the same bed. Medicine was a blend of observation, philosophy, and faith, and nowhere was this mixture more visible than in the understanding of sleep. People knew its necessity. Without rest, the mind faltered, the body weakened, but few could agree on what sleep truly was. Was it the soul's journey outward, or the body's inward turning? Was it divine gift or dangerous vulnerability? Physicians of the time leaned heavily on the ancient wisdom of Galen and Hippocrates, whose ideas were copied, commented upon, and expanded through the centuries. They spoke of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, whose balance governed every aspect of life. To them, sleep was a natural cooling of the body, a gentle withdrawal of heat from the outer limbs to the inner organs. When this rhythm was disrupted, illness followed. Thus, the medieval physician prescribed not dreams, but balance. If you slept too much, you risked dullness of spirit. If too little, a fevered mind. Sleep after a heavy meal was dangerous. The undigested food, they warned, would fester inside you. To sleep after anger was worse still, for the humors stirred by wrath would poison the blood as you rested. And yet, too little sleep was a sin against nature itself, defying the patterns set by God. Light for labor, darkness for rest. Every aspect of nightly life was influenced by this medical philosophy. Bedrooms were arranged to favor health. Physicians advised sleeping with the head slightly raised to prevent vapors from rising from the stomach to the brain. The air should be clean and tempered, not too hot, lest the body's moisture evaporate, not too cold, lest the humors congeal. The ideal sleeper, they wrote, went to bed early, rose with dawn, and avoided disturbing fancies before rest. Reading tales of battle or sorrow could bring nightmares. Instead, one should recite prayers, contemplate the stars, or simply listen to the soft ticking of time. Herbalists and apothecaries offered remedies for sleeplessness, what they called wakeful affliction. A cup of warm milk with crushed poppy seeds, or a tisane of chamomile, lavender, or valerian root, steeped in quiet patience. Some mixed lettuce juice, believing its cool temperament calmed the blood. Others burned sweet herbs near the bedside, rosemary, sage, or rue, to soothe the senses. There were more curious treatments, too. Physicians might prescribe placing a piece of iron beneath the pillow to draw down the restless spirits of the head. In monasteries, monks recorded recipes for soporific draughts, infusions of mandrake, henbane, or opium, meant for the gravely ill or those tormented by feverish dreams. The line between medicine and magic was thin and often invisible. Dreams, too, held a place in this world of belief and study. To the learned, dreams were the result of vapors rising to the brain, carrying with them the day's impressions. But to many others, priests, peasants, and poets alike, they were messages. Perhaps divine, perhaps diabolic. The dreamer awoke not only to the memory of images, but to questions. Was that dream sent to warn? To guide? to test. In royal courts, dream interpreters sometimes held favor. Kings might ask them to read the symbols seen in sleep, searching for signs of fate. One might dream of an overflowing cup, a good omen, suggesting abundance. Another might dream of falling, a warning that pride, like balance, could easily be lost. And yet, beneath all this wonder and worry, people simply slept as they always had, with the rise and fall of breath, with the slow turning of night toward dawn. They did not know of REM cycles or circadian rhythms, but they understood, in their way, that sleep was both mystery and medicine. In the manuscripts of medieval physicians, one finds delicate drawings of reclining figures, serene, eyes closed, robes draped in still folds. Marginal notes explain that rest restores the vital spirits, a phrase both poetic and practical. To them, sleep was not escape but renewal. Imagine a scholar in candlelight, his quill scratching across parchment, describing how the humors cooled as the body lay still. Imagine him pausing, listening to the faint sigh of the wind through the shutters. Outside, the world sleeps. Inside, he records what little can be known. And somewhere between ink and silence, faith and reason meet. There was even then a quiet wisdom in this balance, a sense that sleep connected the human and the divine. To sleep was to trust the order of creation itself. To rest one's head upon linen and close one's eyes was a kind of prayer, wordless, humble, necessary. In that way, their old remedies and beliefs, though strange to us, still carry truth. Warm milk, gentle herbs, the soft rhythms of evening. These are comforts that transcend centuries. Though we may no longer speak of humors or spirits, we still seek the same peace, the deep, unbroken quiet that lets the mind drift free. And so, the night continued, a blend of fear, faith, and fragile understanding. The physicians wrote, the priests prayed, and the sleepers dreamed. Morning would come, as it always did, scattering both shadows and doubts. But for those few precious hours, when candlelight faded and silence reigned, they touched, however briefly, the secret heart of rest. Imagine now stepping into a medieval bedchamber. The air is cool and faintly scented with wood smoke. A single candle flickers upon a chest, its light playing over rough plaster walls and the folds of heavy curtains. The sound of footsteps is softened by rushes scattered on the floor. This was not the quiet, private space we think of today, but a place alive with warmth, work, and shared presence. In the great halls of manors and castles, sleep was often a communal affair. Lords and ladies might have private chambers, but many slept surrounded by attendants or family members. Curtains enclosed the bed, creating a world within a world, a small, shadowed cocoon that kept out drafts and prying eyes. The canopy above was more than decoration. It was protection against dust, cold air, and the occasional falling thatch from the ceiling. The bed itself was a sign of status. In humble cottages, it might be nothing more than a straw-filled mattress laid upon the floor, covered with woolen blankets or furs. In wealthier homes, the bed was a masterpiece of carpentry, a sturdy wooden frame, sometimes carved with vines, saints, or family emblems. The mattress was stuffed with feathers, the sheets made of linen smoothed to near silk by years of washing. Pillows, once rare, became symbols of comfort and luxury. To lie in such a bed, surrounded by the faint scent of clean linen and the creak of polished oak, was a kind of privilege, a daily return to softness in a world of hard labor. The rhythm of the household followed the rhythm of the seasons. In winter, fires were kept burning through the night. Servants rose to feed the embers. In summer, the windows, often little more than shutters, were left ajar, letting in the cool scent of grass and the quiet chirping of night insects. For those in modest homes, the experience was simpler, but not without care. The straw mattress, or pallet, was renewed regularly, the old straw burned to ward off pests. Blankets were patched and re-sewn, their weight both comfort and necessity. Children often slept together for warmth, huddled close beneath one heavy covering. Privacy was rare. The concept of sleeping entirely alone was, for most, almost unknown. Even in monasteries, where silence was sacred, sleep was structured and shared. Monks lay in long rows within stone dormitories, each in a small cell or simple cot. A single lamp burned through the night, casting soft halos of gold upon stone walls. The stillness was broken only by the occasional sigh or shifting of robes. Bells marked the hours, the deep toll for matins, summoning them to rise for prayer, to step from sleep into devotion. The architecture of sleep reflected the social order itself. The Lord's bed was an island of privacy within his hall, raised on a platform, encircled by curtains of velvet or damask. The peasant's bed, by contrast, stood near the hearth, surrounded by the living sounds of family and livestock. Sleep, like everything in medieval life, was hierarchical yet shared. Even the arrangement of rooms spoke to this order. In manor houses, the bedchamber was often adjacent to the solar, the warmest, sunniest room, symbolizing comfort and continuity. In castles, sleeping quarters doubled as places of refuge during siege. Doors were thick, barred, and fitted with iron. Some beds were built against the wall, forming alcoves, or enclosed with wooden panels that could be latched shut, transforming the sleeper's space into a miniature fortress. In the countryside, materials were dictated by what could be gathered. Straw, hay, or dried reeds made the mattress base. Fleece from sheep offered softness. Woolen blankets were heavy and slightly coarse, but carried the scent of lanolin and warmth. Over time, beds became repositories of family history, passed down, repaired, expanded, layered with memory. Night fell early in those times. The glow of the hearth marked the boundary between waking and rest. People talked quietly as they settled into their beds, their words mingling with the crackle of fire and the soft breathing of animals outside. In that rhythm, night did not feel like isolation but continuity, a return to the slow heartbeat of the household. Lighting was precious. Candles of tallow burned unevenly and carried a faint, earthy odor. Beeswax, used by the wealthy and in monasteries, produced a purer flame. Some households used rushlights, reeds dipped in fat, that sputtered and hissed softly as they burned. Their uneven glow lent a shifting beauty to the room, turning simple walls into surfaces alive with gentle movement. And then silence, not absolute, but layered. The distant call of an owl, the low murmur of sleepers, the sigh of wind beneath the eaves. The medieval night was not empty. It was filled with quiet company. Sleep was not merely an individual act, but a shared surrender to time, to rest, to the slow turning of the earth beneath the stars. In that stillness, one might imagine the flickering candle fading, leaving only the faint gleam of moonlight upon the linen. The sleeper drifts between warmth and cool air, between wakefulness and dream. The walls of stone, the wooden frame, the low hum of breath, all hold them in a kind of suspended peace. And as the body sank into rest, so did the world around it. The medieval bedchamber, whether humble or grand, was not simply a place for sleep, but a microcosm of life itself. Warmth, security, hierarchy, and the fragile comfort of darkness. To enter, it was to cross into another realm, the quiet, slow-moving country of dreams. The medieval night was long, far longer than ours. In the centuries before electric light, darkness lasted not for hours, but for half the day, stretching from the fading of twilight to the pale shimmer of dawn. Within that deep expanse of time, sleep unfolded differently. People did not rest in a single, unbroken stretch. Instead, they lived by the rhythm of what scholars now call divided sleep. It began soon after nightfall. Families would retire early, long before midnight. The hearth would be banked, prayers murmured, and the first sleep as old English texts call it, would begin. This was a time of deep slumber, the body's descent into rest after the day's work. In these early hours, dreams were thought to be simple and bodily, the mind still heavy with food, fatigue, and the residue of waking thoughts. Then, sometime around midnight, a gentle stirring, eyes opened to darkness. The fire's glow was now a faint red pulse. The world outside was utterly still, save for the occasional rustle or the sighing of wind against shutters. This was the hour between neither night nor morning, when sleepers awoke naturally, without alarm, and lay quietly in bed. This period was known as the watch or the mid-sleep. It could last an hour or two, and it was not considered unusual. Indeed, it was part of the rhythm of life. People might rise, tend the fire, check on animals, or whisper with one another in low tones. Some prayed. Some even read, if they were among the literate few, their candlelight trembling across parchment. And others, most others, simply rested in a half-waking peace, their minds drifting in the calm space between dreams. It was a time for reflection. In manuscripts, monks and chroniclers wrote that this midnight interval was ideal for devotion, a time when the soul, refreshed from sleep, could commune more clearly with God. The Book of Hours, used by laypeople for private prayer, sometimes included lines meant for these dark, quiet moments. To wake in the middle of the night was not a disruption. It was a sacred opportunity. After this period of stillness came the second sleep, a lighter, dream-filled slumber that carried the sleeper toward morning. This second phase was thought to be more spiritual, the hour when visions might visit, when dreams could carry meaning or messages. In this way, the night itself became divided into two lives, one for the body, one for the soul. Imagine it now, a peasant couple in a quiet cottage. The fire has burned low. They wake without hurry, murmuring softly to one another. Perhaps the husband steps outside for a moment to look at the stars. The world is vast and hushed. The animals shift gently in their stalls. Above, the constellations mark the slow procession of hours. He returns, stokes the embers, and the two lie back down. There is no sense of impatience, no anxiety about lost rest. Only the slow turning of time, measured by breath and warmth. In the great halls of the wealthy, divided sleep followed its own rhythm. Servants might rise to check the fires, guards changed watch, and ladies whispered prayers or consulted their devotional books. Some took advantage of the quiet to write letters or think through matters of the next day. It was, paradoxically, a time of calm productivity, the private hours of the night, when the world belonged to those still half-dreaming. Medieval physicians even recognized this pattern. They advised that those who awoke in the night should not fight it. The body, they said, knew its needs. A small cup of watered wine, a moment of reflection, a prayer, and then back to rest. Forcing sleep, they warned, could disturb the humors and bring melancholy to the head. In monasteries, the rhythm of divided sleep was built into the discipline of daily life. The bell for matins rang around midnight, calling the brothers to rise. They would walk by candlelight to the chapel, chanting psalms in the cold air. Afterward, some returned to their cots for brief rest before dawn. Others remained in quiet contemplation, letting the hours pass in stillness. Their sleep was never entire, but it was serene, balanced, a living pattern of waking and surrender. The existence of divided sleep reminds us that time itself once felt different. There was no bright screen, no electric hum to blur the boundary between day and night. Darkness was its own world, deep, encompassing, and slow. The body responded naturally, dividing its rest into cycles of silence and awareness. People lived with the night, not against it. As morning approached, the second sleep grew lighter. Birds stirred. A thin gray light seeped through shutters and curtains. In towns, bakers began their work, the scent of new bread rising with the dawn. The sleepers awoke, not abruptly, but gradually, as if climbing a slow stairway from dream to daylight. The day returned, and with it the rhythm of labor. Yet for those who had woken in the small hours, the memory of that midnight calm lingered. It was a secret time, a bridge between worlds, a pause in the turning of life's wheel. Some even spoke of it fondly, the peace of the in-between, when thought and dream mingled freely and the mind felt closest to truth. Today, few experience such stillness. Our nights are filled with noise and light, our sleep unbroken but often restless. Yet perhaps, somewhere in our bodies, the memory remains, an echo of that older rhythm. A whisper reminding us that rest need not always be continuous, that sometimes the deepest peace is found not in endless sleep, but in the gentle waking that comes between. The medieval night was not silent. It only seemed so from a distance. To live then was to dwell in a world alive with small, familiar sounds, the breathing of animals, the faint creak of timbers, the slow exhale of the wind. Silence was not the absence of noise. It was the harmony of gentle, ordinary things. Inside a peasant cottage, the walls were thin and the hearth always murmured. The fire, banked under ash, sighed and shifted through the hours, glowing with an orange pulse. In one corner, a hen rustled her feathers. In another, a child turned in sleep. The dog by the door twitched at distant movement, and the straw mattress whispered beneath every change of weight. This was the soundtrack of rest, constant but kind, the sounds of life contained in wood and warmth. Outside, the world deepened. Night carried far in those centuries. Without engines or electricity, every noise stood out. A horse stamping in its stall, a church bell far off, the faint call of an owl. All of it carried across the stillness. People often described such moments as holy, when sound seemed closer to the soul. To hear the world in quiet was, in a sense, to feel the presence of the divine. But the night also held unease. For all its peace, darkness could feel uncertain. Travelers avoided the roads. Wolves and thieves were whispered of in the shadows. That is why doors were barred and prayers spoken. Medieval folk did not take the night for granted. They respected it. In their minds, it belonged as much to spirits as to men. The church shaped this sense of the night profoundly. Bells marked time even after sunset. The monks' chants for Compline, the final prayers of the day, were often described as soft and sorrowful, hymns that folded the world into rest. The sound drifted across villages, through open windows, mixing with the crickets and the sighing wind. For the faithful, that melody meant safety. The world might sleep, but the prayers continued. In castles and manors, the sound were different. Fireplaces popped within great stone halls, and guards' boots echoed on the floors above. Somewhere far off, a hound barked in the courtyard. Servants might whisper as they put away dishes, the clatter of pewter softened by distance. Even in wealth, the night retained its mystery. Candles flickered in high chambers, their light catching on polished shields and tapestries. Each flame became a tiny sun in the vast dark. For those who lay awake, the sick, the worried, the lonely, the night could stretch endlessly. Time itself slowed. The ticking of hours was marked not by clocks, but by sensations, the dying of fire, the paling of stars, the crow of the first rooster. Yet within that long quiet, there was a kind of grace. Many described the small hours as the most intimate part of existence, when thoughts grew tender and the world, though vast, felt near enough to touch. In towns, sleep was more restless. Stray dogs barked, drunkards sang, and the rattle of wagon wheels sometimes echoed even at midnight. But even there, silence reclaimed the streets before dawn. The rhythm of the medieval night, from countryside to cathedral, followed the same slow heartbeat. Dark sound, dark again. People were accustomed to this tapestry of noise and quiet. They listened without fear, and when strange sound arose, they interpreted them through story. A knocking might be the wind, or it might be a restless soul. A distant wail might be a fox, or the echo of sin unshriven. The line between natural and supernatural blurred easily in the half-light. The imagination, like the night, was vast. Yet not all night sounds were feared. Some were cherished. The call of the nightingale, for instance, was a symbol of both love and sorrow in medieval poetry. Writers from Chaucer to the anonymous monks of old songbooks describe how its song floated through open windows, mingling with dreams. To fall asleep to such a sound was thought to soothe the spirit. And in monasteries, even the silence itself was a sound. Monks were trained to move quietly, to let the hush of their steps become a prayer. The soft rustle of robes, the crackle of a candle, the turning of a page, all part of the music of devotion. They called it holy quiet. For those who lived then, the night was not empty. It was full of breath, of memory, of small noises that bound them to life. A mother's whisper, a rooster's faint stir, the sigh of winter wind through thatch, all told them that the world continued, that nothing was ever truly still. As dawn neared, the soundscape shifted. The silence began to break, not suddenly but softly. First a bird, then another, then the rustle of morning chores beginning. Buckets clanked, doors creaked, and the distant bell of lauds, the dawn prayer, called the faithful to rise. The long quiet folded itself away like a dream. Those who had slept through the dark did not think of the night as something conquered, but something shared. They had passed through it, accompanied by its sounds and silences, and emerged into the pale light renewed. For them, the night was not an interruption of life. It was part of it, as natural as breath, as inevitable as dawn. In the medieval world, sleep was not a universal experience. It varied as sharply as the walls that divided the poor from the powerful. To close one's eyes at night meant very different things depending on one's station in life. Whether you were huddled near a cottage hearth or reclining beneath embroidered hangings in a noble chamber. For peasants, sleep was a necessity. For nobles, it was a luxury. The rhythms of rest reflected the rhythms of wealth and work. As dusk fell, peasants ended their day not with leisure, but exhaustion. Their sleep was deep, but often brief, broken by the cry of animals, the stir of infants, or the harsh call of early chores. Their beds were shared, their blankets rough, and privacy almost unheard of. A single bed might hold parents, children, and even grandparents. The scent of earth and straw filled the air, the faint smoke from the dying fire clinging to their clothes. Imagine yourself in such a space. A low-roofed cottage, walls plastered with mud and straw, one small window shuttered against the cold. The night presses close, and every sound feels part of the room. The bleating of a goat just outside, the sighing of the wind through the thatch. You pull a wool blanket over your shoulders, heavy but scratchy, and listen to the rhythm of breathing all around you. Sleep comes not as a retreat, but as a surrender to weariness. For the wealthier classes, the experience was almost ceremonial. Within castle chambers, bedchambers were status symbols, architectural showcases of comfort and power. The bed itself was often the most expensive piece of furniture in the entire household. Carved oak, silk hangings, feather mattresses, velvet covers. These were not merely for rest, but for display. To be seen reclining amid such splendor was to announce one's rank. Yet even here, comfort had limits. Great halls were cold and drafty. Stone walls held the chill of night, and the echo of servants' footsteps carried through corridors. Fires crackled, but the warmth seldom reached every corner. The noble sleeper might rest behind curtains drawn tight, creating a small cocoon of heat and privacy, a world within a world. In the morning, those curtains would be drawn open by servants, revealing their master to the light of day, a ritual as much social as practical. Sleep, in this sense, was also performance. It was seen, acknowledged, even politicized. Who slept where, and beside whom, said much about one's place in the medieval order. While peasants shared beds out of necessity, nobles shared them for influence. It was common for visiting dignitaries or trusted companions to sleep in the same chamber, even in the same bed, not as an act of intimacy, but of alliance. Bed sharing symbolized trust. Chronicles record kings sleeping beside their knights or clerics as a public statement of favor. The bed was both sanctuary and stage. Among monks, the approach to sleep reflected neither poverty nor luxury, but devotion. In monasteries, beds were simple wooden frames, often placed in communal dormitories. The rule of silence extended even to rest. Monks would retire without speaking, their movements measured and reverent. Their nights were broken by the call to matins, the midnight prayers. Rising from sleep to chant in the dark was a discipline of humility, a reminder that rest was not an escape from duty, but part of it. In cities, the contrast grew even sharper. Wealthy merchants slept in carved beds draped with imported fabrics, while apprentices and servants slept in corners, under stairs, or on pallets of straw. The hum of urban life seeped into every layer of society. The distant bells, the shuffle of guards, the occasional cry from the streets. In this way, sleep mirrored the city itself, divided, layered, alive. The act of sleeping, something so natural to us now, was then shaped by every social and spiritual force at play. For the peasant, it was about survival. For the noble, a statement of order. For the monk, a ritual of the soul. Across these worlds, one truth connected them all: the need to surrender, however briefly, to the quiet embrace of the night. Even the materials of the bed told a story. Peasants used straw and rushes. Nobles used feathers and down. In times of famine, peasants might stuff their bedding with dry leaves or moss. In contrast, aristocrats perfumed their beds with lavender, rosemary, or rose petals, believing scent could guard against illness and bad dreams. The distance between these beds was not only physical, but symbolic. One smelled of earth, the other of heaven. Yet, in both, sleep remained the great equalizer. No matter how grand the chamber or how humble the hut, every medieval sleeper drifted into the same uncertain dark. Kings and shepherds alike laid down their burdens, trusting that morning would return. The night made no distinctions. Before the world awoke, the medieval dawn arrived quietly. It crept into villages and valleys not with alarm bells or bustling roads, but with the slow blooming of light upon rooftops, the faint shimmer of mist dissolving over fields. The first sounds of morning were humble: the lowing of cattle, the crow of a rooster, the muffled footsteps of someone stirring the ashes of last night's fire. For most people, waking was not a matter of choice. The rhythm of life was tied to the sun and the tasks it demanded. Peasants rose early because the land required them to. Their mornings began in dim light, their bodies already aching from the labor that awaited. There was no indulgence, no pause to stretch and plan the day, only movement, instinctive and steady. The line between night and day blurred into one continuous rhythm of survival. Inside the cottage, the hearth glowed faintly, rekindled from the embers left before sleep. Someone, often the mother or eldest child, would kneel beside it, blowing softly until flame caught. Smoke thickened for a moment, curling toward the ceiling beams before slipping out through the thatch. That single act, coaxing fire back to life, was a kind of daily resurrection. It marked the true beginning of day. Meanwhile, outside, the fields waited. Men and women stepped into the morning dew, their breath visible in the cool air. Birds called from hedges, and the first rays of sunlight brushed the tops of distant hills. The soil, still damp from night, held a quiet promise that work, once again, might yield enough to live. The rhythm of rising was also deeply spiritual. The church structured not only people's days, but their very sense of time. Bells from distant churches or monasteries announced the hour of matins and lauds, prayers meant to greet the dawn. Even those who could not read or count time by clock could feel the rhythm of sacred hours by the sound of bells. In monasteries, the day began in darkness. Monks rose long before sunrise, summoned by a single toll echoing through the stone halls. They would light candles, don their habits, and move in silent procession toward the chapel. Their voices rose in low, resonant chant, meeting the stillness of the night just before it broke. To them, dawn was not a simple transition from dark to light. It was the spiritual reawakening of creation itself. In towns, mornings were more restless. Bakers began before anyone else, kneading dough in the cool hours before sunrise. The smell of baking bread drifted through narrow streets. mingling with the smoke of chimneys. Market traders opened their stalls as light crept over rooftops. The ringing of hammers from blacksmiths' forges joined the growing symphony of morning, metallic, rhythmic, alive. For nobles and their households, rising was ceremonial. Servants entered bedchambers to draw back the heavy curtains of canopied beds, letting in the pale light of morning. Water was poured into basins for washing. Clothes were laid out carefully. The day began not with work, but with preparation, grooming, dressing, attending to matters of the household or estate. In these circles, time moved more slowly, as if daylight itself bowed to hierarchy. But even among the privileged, there was reverence for the early hour. Morning prayers were often spoken beside open windows, where the air was cool and fresh. It was believed that the soul was closest to purity in those moments, when the world was quiet and the sky, washed with pink and silver, seemed young again. Children, too, played their part in the dawn. They fetched water, gathered wood, or tended small fires. Their laughter mingled with the bleating of animals and the distant tolling of bells. To them, morning was not yet burdened with worry. It was an adventure renewed each day. Dawn in the medieval world was also a time of reflection, a pause between survival and purpose. The night had passed safely, and that alone was reason enough for gratitude. Many households began their day with simple prayers, murmured softly while breaking bread or tying a cloak. To greet the day was to acknowledge both its blessings and its trials. The senses came alive slowly. The smell of wet earth, the taste of bread still warm from the oven, the feel of wool against skin, the faint metallic tang of morning air. There was no rush to consume, no flood of noise. Life unfurled gradually, in rhythm with the turning of the earth itself. As the sun climbed higher, color returned to the world. The gray of night shifted to gold, and the shapes of things grew sharp and real again. Trees, rooftops, faces. The light touched everything equally, from the lowly field to the Lord's tower, a rare democracy of warmth. For medieval people, this daily return of light was never taken for granted. It was a small miracle repeated endlessly. Each dawn, the world began anew, and with it, the endless cycle of labor, prayer, and rest. In that rhythm lay both hardship and hope, the steady heartbeat of a civilization that measured time not by clocks, but by the rising and setting of the sun. In a medieval imagination, sleep was not merely a pause between days. It was a bridge, a fragile, mysterious passage between the mortal world and something unseen. To close one's eyes was to open another kind of vision, one that belonged not to the body but to the soul. Dreams were not dismissed as fleeting illusions. They were treated as messages, sometimes divine, sometimes dangerous. The night, to medieval minds, was alive with meaning. Every flicker of candlelight, every stirring of the wind against the shutters, carried the potential for omen or sign. When a person dreamed, it was believed their soul wandered, traveling through unseen realms, encountering angels, spirits, or echoes of things yet to come. What they brought back upon waking could shape the choices of the living day. For common folk, dreams often revolved around simple symbols. To dream of clear water meant peace, of murky depths, trouble. To see a blazing hearth meant good fortune, but to see it go out was a warning of illness or loss. Farmers might dream of abundant crops or withered fields, taking it as guidance for the season ahead. The language of dreams was woven into the rhythms of their lives, as essential as the weather or the harvest. Among the learned, dream interpretation was a serious pursuit. Medieval scholars inherited the ancient writings of Aristotle and Macrobius, who believed that dreams could reflect both the health of the body and the state of the soul. In monasteries, monks recorded their visions in careful Latin, interpreting them through the lens of faith. A dream of light might symbolize divine grace, a dream of shadows, temptation. It was common for people to seek advice from priests or wise women about their dreams. These interpretations blended Christian doctrine with older folk beliefs, a quiet mingling of the sacred and the ancient. Dreams were not private. They were shared, discussed, examined like relics. In the stillness of the medieval night, the boundary between the spiritual and the earthly was porous. Nobles and rulers took their dreams especially seriously. Chronicles are filled with accounts of kings who changed the course of wars or marriages because of a single vision seen in sleep. A dream might be read as a divine warning or as a message from a saint. Some even employed dream interpreters at court, trusted to discern what lay hidden in the images of the night. But not all dreams were comforting. The medieval night could also be haunted by nightmares. The dreaded incubus or night hag, creature said to sit upon a sleeper's chest and steal their breath. Such experiences, now known as sleep paralysis, were then believed to be signs of demonic presence. People prayed for protection before bed, tracing crosses over their pillows, sprinkling holy water, or hanging small relics near their heads. Sleep was a sacred act, but one that invited both grace and danger. For monks, the meaning of dreams was approached with caution. They were taught to distrust the imagery of the mind, seeing it as a test of humility. Yet even among the devout, stories spread of holy visions that came in the hours of rest, saints appearing to the faithful, divine messages whispered in dreams. These were recorded in chronicles with awe and reverence, proof that even in stillness, the spirit remained awake. Artists and writers, too, were shaped by the medieval fascination with dreams. Illuminated manuscripts often depicted sleepers surrounded by delicate, swirling clouds, the soul shown as a miniature figure hovering above the body. Poets described dreams as journeys through strange landscapes, filled with allegory and meaning. In works like The Romance of the Rose or Piers Plowman, the dream became a stage for the soul's reflection, a mirror for the human condition. For ordinary people, dreams offered both comfort and curiosity. In a world without modern explanations, they gave a sense of connection to something larger, something mysterious. A mother might whisper her child's dream to a neighbor. A shepherd might ponder the meaning of a strange vision as he walked through misty fields. Dreams gave shape to the invisible parts of life, hopes, fears, and prayers too quiet to speak aloud. Some dreams were even thought to be prophetic. There are records of villagers dreaming of fires, floods, or death's days before they happened. Whether coincidence or not, such stories spread easily, reinforcing the belief that sleep could open a window into fate. Others, however, saw dreams as reflections of the day's burdens. Too much wine, some said, or too heavy a heart. The balance between faith and skepticism shifted like the shadows of the moon. Even nightmares were sometimes viewed with purpose. To dream of fear or pain was to glimpse the battle of the soul, a sign that evil was near but not yet victorious. Upon waking, one might pray for protection or light a candle for peace. The act of interpreting dreams thus became a kind of spiritual hygiene, a way to cleanse the unseen mind. In the end, medieval people did not separate sleep from life. They saw it as a continuation of existence, only gentler, slower, veiled. The night was the world's inward breath, the dream, its whisper. To them, the sleeper was both vulnerable and sacred, poised between two realities, held softly by both. And when dawn came, and the sleeper stirred, the dream would dissolve like mist, leaving behind not just images, but feelings. Wonder, fear, gratitude, the sense of having touched something just beyond reach. For the medieval mind, that was enough. To dream was to know, if only for a moment, that there was more to the world than waking could ever show. And so, the night settles again, just as it did centuries ago. The candles burn low. The hearth fades to embers. Somewhere, far away in memory, a church bell tolls the hour, marking another slow passage of time. You've traveled tonight through the strange and gentle customs of the medieval world, through cottages filled with sleeping families, through the quiet halls of monks at prayer, through noble chambers draped in velvet, and through the mysterious landscape of dreams that once bound all these souls together. It's a world long gone, yet somehow still familiar. The rhythm of their nights, the need for warmth, for safety, for meaning in the dark, is still our rhythm. We may no longer bank the fire or fear the night wind, but we still chase comfort. We still close our eyes and trust the quiet. The same fragile ritual continues, surrendering to sleep, letting the mind drift where daylight cannot follow. As you rest now, imagine those distant centuries breathing softly beside you. The same stars above, the same moonlight slipping through old shutters. The sound of their world was slower, gentler. Perhaps if you listen closely, you can still hear it. The crackle of fire, the whisper of linen, the steady heartbeat of time. In every age, the night has belonged to dreamers. To the farmer sleeping by his hearth. To the monk rising in the dark. To the noble surrounded by silk and silence. And now to you. So, as you drift away, remember that history itself never truly sleeps. It waits, quiet and patient, inside the moments we forget to notice. Close your eyes. Let the centuries fade. Let the stories rest. The world outside will keep turning, just as it always has. Soft hum of wind, faint church bell far away, then silence. If this quiet corner of history helped you rest, if the gentle pace and old stories brought you peace, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you calm. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. It's comforting to think of all of us scattered across the world, drifting to sleep beneath the same quiet night, listening to the same soft stories. Thank you for spending your evening with me, here in the gentle company of the past. Until next time, this is the Sleepy Historian, wishing you rest, warmth, and dreams that drift like candle smoke into the stars.